Hello, my name is Corey Yarbrough, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition, and I'm excited to be back for another installment of HBGC's Mayoral Video Series. Today, I'm in the South End at Titus Park to interview John Barros. John Barros is a native of Boston who is a former school board committee member. He is also the former Executive Director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. Today, I'm here to pick John's brain about education, youth empowerment, transgender protections, and environmental justice as it relates to LGBT people of color, particularly Black and Latino communities. Mr. Barros, thank you so much for coming to do this interview with us today.
Thanks for the invite.
Great. So you've done a lot with us, and most recently HBGC. You came to our advocacy day, you participated in Youth Pride and regular Pride. So just tell me a little bit more about why it's so important to you to get involved in the LGBT community.
It's a part of Boston that is vibrant, is important to the city. It's a part of Boston that, in fact, whether we know it or not, is all of our lives. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, you know, talking about the LGBT community is not like talking about some community over there. Yeah. It's our community, right? And if we're not participating in a way that is helping to create more tolerance, mm-hmm. helping to create more a sense of awareness of the issues, then what are we doing? Then we're not ready to lead, right? And so as a candidate for mayor of Boston, I've got to be ready to lead, and that means embracing the LGBT community.
Okay, great. So the Boston Globe referred to you as the long shot candidate that deserves a second look. Do you feel like you're the long shot candidate? And how has your candidacy as being, you know, one of few people who haven't been elected into elected office influenced the way you conduct your campaign?
Well, you know, long shot candidate is an interesting description. Mm-hmm. It is, particularly given the mainstream media and how they think about candidates, it is it's a title that is really saying I don't hold political office. It's a title that is saying I don't have a ready stream of funders that have always given to my campaign and will give now. And then right after that it says, but he's essentially worthy or capable of being a good mayor. Right, and so here's a guy who hasn't held office, who doesn't have a ready stream of money, who is capable and probably could be a really good mayor. So it's a perspective that I have been talking to voters about, that is asking voters to not just think about lining up with the winner or who the perceived winner is, depending on your angle, but to line up with the person that you think would be the best mayor. Line up and get off the sidelines and get behind me if you believe that we share a vision, if you believe that my leadership is the leadership that Boston needs right now. And it's something that actually has been resonating. People typically look at this in terms of who's winning and which winner should I get behind. But it's not doing justice to the things that we believe in and care about if that's our only lens. And I think, you know, Scott Lehigh in that article was really saying to Boston, well, hold on a second. Maybe there's another way to look at this race. Maybe the way to look at this race is look at who might be worthy of being mayor.
So, great, all of that. One thing in addition that's mentioned on your website is giving local schools more autonomy to make decisions. So tell me a little bit more about what that means, but also in the context of LGBT inclusion, because HBGC has had some difficulties getting GSA started in certain schools just because that principal or the headmaster believes a certain thing. So when you could have people who hold certain beliefs that may block programs such as that, how could we navigate that conflict by also giving them more autonomy, yet getting that inclusion that we need?
Right, so giving schools more autonomy, it doesn't mean they decide everything and anything. You know, for example, there is a common core set of standards on curriculum. So in fact, Boston is moving to a more common curriculum based on the Massachusetts guidelines. And so schools will have some autonomy within that realm to figure out how they're going to apply the kind of pedagogy they're going to teach to help kids, help the students reach proficiency and beyond, advanced proficiency. So in the same way, the district needs to set goals and principles that the schools live by. And GSAs and the availability of GSAs is something that I think all schools need to understand we don't block. We help nurture and help make sure it's organized. And so under my leadership, that would be a message that's clear. We can't have schools picking which values and what part of the student body we're going to support. We have to support all students, and that means the LGBT community has to be supported in all our schools.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else as far as challenging bullying in schools, help preventing youth suicide rates that you think we need in addition to more clubs and organizations?
As you know, the question of bullying, the question of abuse, the question of support for students, both from a mental health perspective and also from respect within the school, and the ability to have voice and have their identity celebrated is something that is dear to me. We've lost way too many LGBT youth, particularly youth of color, who haven't found the support that they need as they've asked questions about their sexuality and tried to figure out how they fit in.
Yeah.
And we've got to be more supportive. The schools have got to be a place where they can find that kind of support. So training for guidance counselors is a must. Training for school leadership, a must. Abuse is something that we have a really good policy on. It's a pretty comprehensive policy, but it's not necessarily one that I'm sure is adhered to universally, particularly around the LGBT issues. And so that's something that's going to need some awareness and real leadership around.
Okay, great. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the diversity of Boston, which a few times you've mentioned in interviews that Boston can be perceived as an unwelcoming city, or you viewed Boston as an unwelcoming city in the past. So as mayor, what will you do to not only shine emphasis on the diversity that Boston has, but make sure we're interacting in a way that's productive for the city?
Right. I mean, you've heard me say before that I really think celebrating things we value is important.
Yeah.
Celebrating the LGBT community, celebrating diversity, racial diversity is really important. Geographic diversity is important. But then beyond celebrating, we need to have some markers. We need to make sure that if you in fact value diversity, that leadership looks like that. That there is a sense of Boston taking on that identity. So for me, my administration would be representative of the kind of diversity that we have in the city. But it starts there. And it really needs to continue on to being a very inclusive administration where there's opportunities for all. And people get to participate in the economic life of the city, the political life of the city, the social life of the city in a way that it represents the best of Boston. As you've heard me say in the past, I haven't always felt, particularly as a young person growing in the city, that the city has always been embracing of all of its diversity. And so it took me a while to even begin to really feel that the natural assets of the city was something that I should take advantage of. Going to museums. I was 18 or even older before I went to the Charles River and really, enjoyed the Charles River as something that belonged to me in Boston. And that shouldn't be the case. Boston should be a place that is embracing of all its diversity and, more importantly, builds on that diversity so that we can create a creative economy where our arts and culture is something that we are able to sustain our lives from in supporting artists and supporting young people that are about expression. I mean, so the poetry nights and restaurants and places that people can frequent and see Boston in its fullest. As mayor, I would make sure that the young people of this city and the diversity of this city is also supported through a social infrastructure that allows people to create networks and relationships all around the city. We have neighborhoods that feel isolated. I've been talking to people in different neighborhoods like Mattapan and other parts of the city and parts of Dorchester that feel like they can't connect to other neighborhoods as easily as they would like to. So transportation needs to be one that's designed where people can easily get around the city and enjoy the main streets of different neighborhoods.
Let me, if I could just hop in there, because when we talk about diversity, economics, and access to different neighborhoods, something that jumped out to me on your website was that you are in favor of, and I think is worded as having mixed income neighborhoods. And I think for a lot of people that could be read as gentrification. So why is having mixed income neighborhoods important to you, and how can we do that in a way that preserves the culture of that particular neighborhood? Right,
so in Boston, we have a regulation, a requirement that whenever there's a development, that 15% of that development is affordable. And in certain neighborhoods, we've allowed developers to buy out of the affordability. And so we are building neighborhoods in Boston which are exclusive to high luxury condos and really expensive living. That's where I am talking about we need to have more mixed income units, right? That we need to allow low income, moderate income, and working families to be able to afford and live in those parts of the city. We can't put public money in parts of the city and not allow people access. It's just not fair. And so allowing developers to buy out of those affordability ordinances, affordability regulations is just wrong. Then that money that they buy out of affordability with goes into a pot that is for building affordability or affordable units elsewhere. And so what we end up doing is concentrating affordable units in different parts of the city and not spreading it out throughout the city. It really doesn't allow residents who might be of more modest income to really take part of the parts of the city that are being best developed.
Okay.
And so for me, spreading the diversity of affordability around the city is really critical.
Okay, great. Let's shift gears again, talk about transgender discrimination. I'm not too sure if you're aware, but there is a bill right now called the Equal Access Bill that is related to transgender discrimination and public accommodations. Tell us a little bit about if you would support such a bill or where you stand when it comes to transgender discrimination.
No, I do support the bill, and I am aware of the bill. And, so I just came back from a conference around jobs and young people, the coalition of young people put together to think about, how they use their voice on certain issues.
Yeah.
And, in places that are tolerant, people ask you what your pronoun is, right? And you tell them whether you want to be addressed as he, she, him, her, and I think we've got to create a society that's far more sensitive on the issue of transgender discrimination by allowing people to dictate how they want to be present, right? How they want to or think that they are, in fact, a part of our communities. And transgender discrimination is one that starts with those real sensitive trainings that allows us to understand the diversity around us in a way that's more than just the eye, right? Because sometimes we go to our eyes and we start making assumptions, and we've got to not do that. Now, it's not just about how we interact. It's also about policies. It's also about, healthcare. It's about access to living quarters. It's about, how you think about apartments and leases. I mean, I've heard all types of stories, and we've got to create the right policies that allow people access to the amenities and the services that we all get.
Yeah. And one of the things that is a hot topic when we talk about transgender protections is the idea of gender-neutral bathrooms. Is that something that you would be in support of, or would be willing to help bring to Boston?
No, absolutely. I mean, there was a day when there was only 2 bathrooms. Now, most places you get 3 bathrooms because they're aware of parents that need to be in a space that is changing their kids, or because they think 1 bathroom needs to be bigger for access for wheelchairs. Whatever the case may be, that our society needs to continue to be more and more sensitive to transgender issues in a way that we give access to bathrooms, fitting rooms, right? Because that's been a big issue, and different areas where you can have, greater access.
Great. Let's kind of combine some things we've talked about and talk about transgender people, LGBT people really as a whole, and jobs. Because on your website, you're in favor of having more collaboration and more investment in career centers, organizations that help with reentry and job placement. And oftentimes LGBT people can be discriminated within those places. So what's a realistic way or what's your plan to ensure that some of the people who are most marginalized in society, such as LGBT people of color, can get access to the skills, and then once having the skills can actually land the job to survive?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of access to services and programs. There is a bias in terms of who has access. And we need to make sure that training around sensitivity and awareness, frankly, is something that we're serious about. That, programs, whether it's job placement programs, workforce development programs throughout the city, that have any kind of public money, that are getting any kind of public contracts, need to go through certain sensitivity trainings and awareness programs that allow them to understand their own biases and allow them to understand the practices that they need, so we're inclusive of everyone, transgender or anyone in the LGBTQ community, right? And so really making sure that people understand the issues, because like race issues, you know, folks will tell you that, you know, they're not racist or they're not biased against any community, but the numbers don't show it, right? And the outcomes don't show it. And so how are we more aware of our practices so that we can get the right demographics involved? If Boston has a certain percentage of any community, we need to make sure that those communities are all represented in the programs and in the jobs that we provide our citizens.
Okay, great. So just a few more questions. Something I do want to definitely touch on, because I think it makes you really unique as a candidate, is environmental justice and your passion for that. So tell me a little bit about why you would hope some voters would be as concerned about environmental justice issues, and what is your position on creating a more healthy, green Boston?
That's a really good question. Environmental justice has been really important to me since I can remember. I lived in a neighborhood in a part of Roxbury that was an environmental justice neighborhood, meaning we hosted in Roxbury 9 to 10% of our waste management firms for the city of Boston. We continue to be a neighborhood that is victim to all types of health disparities. We continue to be housed next to adverse uses that are not helping the health and the quality of life of the people who live in that neighborhood. And so part of the work that I've done at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative has been to help improve the quality of life in my neighborhood. And that has meant that we have remediated brownfields that have been sites that have been polluted. We have closed down businesses that have been really had some adverse effects on the health of the people of Roxbury. We have protested against things like the Level 4 lab. We have protested against more incineraries in our neighborhood. We have on the flip side of that, though, presented a vision for a neighborhood that has more sustainable design features, that is supporting urban agriculture and the reclaiming of land for use that is sustainable and healthy for residents, such as growing local food and providing ways for local businesses to access local foods, local fruits and vegetables. We helped to open up a 10,000 square foot greenhouse on a land that was a brownfield that used to be occupied by an auto body that was a chop shop, right? And you know, for all of those reasons, that is a symbolic project for rebuilding a neighborhood and using urban, agricultural, and sustainable design features as the way to move it forward. Because we also know that climate change is a big part of leading any of America's cities. We need to reduce our carbon footprint in Boston. I am for moving to a city that's carbon neutral, that relies less on fossil fuels as the source of energy, and moving to a more green technology based economy. And in doing that, we need to create the kind of clusters and incentives for businesses who are thinking about the kinds of energy efficient solutions, who are thinking about the kinds of sustainable solutions to really be attracted to Boston and come and start businesses and hire people from our community and create products that we can use in municipal buildings and we can use in residential and commercial buildings.
Okay, great. One quick follow-up question with that, especially when you talk about waste management sites, which a significant of them are and have been in Roxbury. I think the number one fear when we talk about environmental justice is, if not in Roxbury, then where? So where do we move into? Really briefly, what would be your answer to that?
Well, when we think about sort of waste management firms, I think, you know, regional city planning needs to be part of regional planning. And, you know, there are places with less residents where you can locate certain clusters of businesses that can serve a city, but not necessarily be abutting a neighborhood, right? And Boston needs to be part of a real smart growth movement that includes a regional look at where certain businesses should go, because I am for business development. They hire people in our neighborhood. But there's also even the businesses, the waste management firms that exist in our neighborhood today. they're good neighbors.
Yeah.
In fact, they're using real sustainable practices to make sure that we can't smell the waste, to make sure that the way that they treat the waste is healthy, that they are not accepting certain kinds of waste because it might not be good to process them locally. And so awareness is, in terms of local businesses really understanding their impact on the quality of life of residents is the other way to go about it. So it's not that all waste management firms can't exist in Boston, but there are practices that are better, and that there are ways to plan clusters away from the city and city life for those practices that are adverse to health in a way that it's not close to our residential neighborhoods.
So one of the last topics I want to talk to you about today is health disparities, particularly around HIV, as Massachusetts has significantly reduced the new infections of HIV, except for in Black and Latino communities. So what will be your plan for Boston's Black and Latino communities for eliminating HIV?
As you know, the health disparities of all sorts as it relates to Black and brown communities in Massachusetts is really alarming. The HIV numbers and the ability for us to decrease the number of new HIVs in our community is as alarming. And I believe it starts with access in our communities, where we need to make sure that our health centers are places that our young people particularly, but particularly our males, right, want to go to, feel that it's okay to visit, go to the doctor, get checked, or learn about things, because education is the other part of this, right? We need to educate people and outreach to people for the need to really learn about preventative practices, really learn about sort of what they need to know for their own health. And then I think we need to say to people that it is not about demonizing a community, that understanding some of the health risks is not about talking about what's wrong with our community. And so often, whether it's mental health issues or physical issues, physical biological issues, that we might be at risk of health issues, that we feel bad about them, and we don't want to engage in a conversation about what the issue might be and how we can resolve it. We need to shift that conversation. We need to talk about the importance of being more preventative and the education around accessing services and information, and that starts with creating a culture, once again, in our health centers and in hospitals that allow us to feel more welcome. Okay.
Great. So I want to conclude with what's called my lightning round, and it's basically 4 questions. I just want you to complete the sentence for you. So in like 4 or 5 words, complete some of these statements for me. So the first one is, a more just and equal Boston requires
leadership that looks differently and is more representative of the city of Boston.
Great. A personal hero of mine is?
Personal hero of mine is Martin Luther King, because he was such an important part of creating a more just society.
Great. An area as a leader I would like to improve in is?
I would like to improve in my name recognition around the city.
Okay, good one. And my last one is, to the Black and Latino LGBT community, I pledge.
I pledge support, I pledge being a partner, I pledge being a champion, and I pledge being a leader that is going to move Boston to being a more tolerant city that values the LGBTQ community.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Let us know how we can get involved in your campaign or get more information about you.
So to be more involved in the campaign, you can go to www.barrosforboston.com and find out more information. We need volunteers, but we also need people to donate. So think about donating your time or donating your money to help make this a city that's more tolerant and a city that values the LGBT community.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.